I did my sports medicine project 6 on how caffeine affects the heart. Caffeine is one of the most widely consumed stimulants in the world, found in coffee, tea, energy drinks, and even some medications. Many people underestimate its effects, often viewing it as a harmless boost to alertness and productivity. However, its impact goes beyond being a convenient energy pickup or booster. It can negatively influence sleep patterns, raise heart rate, and even contribute to anxiety or dependency on caffeine. The overall effect of daily caffeine consumption, especially in large amounts, can be significant, but its influence is usually underestimated. What is caffeine? Caffeine is a stimulant found in energy drinks, coffee, tea, and many other things. It works by blocking a chemical in the brain called adenosine, which makes you feel tired when adenosine is blocked. The brain becomes more active and it releases other chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine, makes you feel more awake, alert, and focused. This is why caffeine can help improve concentration and reduce feelings of fatigue. It can also speed up your heart rate and raise blood pressure temporarily. And the picture shows kind of how it works. The circle, like half circle on the left, is your brain cell, and then it just shows how the receptors get almost immune to the adenosine because the caffeine is blocking it from going on the brain cell. Heart health. Increased heart rate is called tachycardia, and mechanism of getting this increased heart rate is because caffeine is a stimulant, like I said. It can increase heart rate by blocking that adenosine receptors, which normally help slow down the heart rate, and that's when it blocks like a controlled heart rate, then your heart rate gets raised, and this can lead to tachycardia. And like I said, it's just an increased heart rate, a faster than normal heart rate. This is a risk for most people, and this is like temporarily. It's a short-term like increase in heart rate, but for individuals with pre-existing heart conditions, especially those with arrhythmias or heart disease, caffeine can basically just like increase and worsen these pre-existing conditions. And on the right shows a picture of what a tachycardia heart rate would look like, which is, like I said, just an increased heart rate. Heart health. Elevated blood pressure is called hypertension. The mechanism of this is that caffeine can cause a temporary increase in blood pressure too, particularly in those who are not habitual coffee drinkers, which just means like regular coffee drinkers. It does this by stimulating the release of adrenaline, which constricts blood vessels. The risk is for people with hypertension or those at risk of developing high blood pressure. Excessive caffeine intake may worsen this condition. Long-term effects are still debated, but there is concern that regular high caffeine consumption can contribute to sustained hypertension in some people. And the picture on the right shows how like a heart functions normally on the left, and then on the right it shows like how it's pumping harder and what hypertension would look like. And it doesn't flow as easily through the blood vessels. Arrhythmias is irregular heartbeats, and this is another thing that can come from drinking too much caffeine. Its mechanism is caffeine can influence the electrical signals that regulate the heart's rhythm, and in some individuals it may trigger irregular heartbeats, which is this arrhythmias. And this is especially in people with an underlying predisposition to heart rhythm problems, so any pre-existing conditions can influence this. Risk caffeine-induced arrhythmias are generally not a concern for most people. So if most people who are young, healthy, and don't have pre-existing conditions aren't usually at risk, but those with a history or pre-existing history of arrhythmias should exercise caution, and caffeine can potentially worsen these conditions. And atrial fibrillation is what that basically is arrhythmias. And on the right, it just shows the difference between arrhythmia and a normal heartbeat. Okay, heart health. Heart health can, like another heart health problem that can come from caffeine is an increased risk of a heart attack or a stroke. Mechanism of a heart attack. Some studies show that the excessive caffeine consumption might increase the risk of heart attacks in certain individuals, particularly those who have a genetic pre-existing condition. metabolize caffeine more slowly. This slower metabolism can lead to higher blood caffeine levels and prolonged stimulant effects. The risk of a heart attack due to caffeine is minimal for most people, but those with specific genetic traits or pre-existing cardiovascular conditions may be more susceptible or just like prone to a heart attack. And on the right top, there's a picture of what a heart attack looks like, which is showing a blood clot um, going through the artery. And you can just see that there's cholesterol plaque and it's not going through as easily. Okay, and then the mechanism of a stroke is in rare cases, excessive caffeine intake may contribute to the stroke risk. This is most likely due to its effect on blood pressure, which can increase the likelihood of both ischemic and hemorrhagic strokes. Which are just the two types of strokes. High caffeine consumption can also increase clotting activity in the blood, which may pose additional risks. The link between caffeine and stroke is not fully understood, and moderate caffeine intake is generally considered safe. However, people with uncontrolled hypertension and other stroke risk factors should be cautious, because caffeine can basically just um, exaggerate pre-existing things, and it can just contribute to somebody who's already prone to strokes to having a stroke. And then the bottom right picture shows bottom right. It shows the blood clot and how it's blocked and the blood flow is poor, and then it just shows the part of the brain that could happen. Another thing is coronary artery spasm. The mechanism is caffeine can occasionally cause a temporary narrowing of the coronary arteries, which are the blood vessels that supply the heart. This is known as a coronary artery spasm, which can reduce blood flow to the heart. The risk, while they're rare, a coronary artery spasm can cause chest pain or a heart attack, especially in people with a history of coronary artery disease or those prone to spasms. The picture on the right is showing just an explanation of a coronary artery spasm, and you can see where it happens and how the artery gets pinched and the blood can't flow through as easily. Long-term effects and compromises. Chronic excessive caffeine consumption has shown to affect long-term cardiovascular health, while we've been talking about mainly shorter-term cardiovascular health and just kind of the shorter term, easily healed from diseases, but there are some long term, and these can potentially contribute to the endothelial dysfunction, which is damage to the lining of the blood vessels, which could increase the risk of atherosclerosis, which is hardening and narrowing of the arteries. People at risk for these effects are more likely to occur with very high levels of caffeine intake, which is more than 500 milligrams per day, which is double what you're supposed to have, or just the maximum that you're supposed to have. So this is a severe amount of caffeine, and more research is needed to fully understand the long-term impact of caffeine in cardiovascular health, but this is a continued to be study risk. This is potentially life-threatening, and medications may help, but they aren't guaranteed, and it could lead to a need of cardiovascular surgery if the long-term effects get bad enough. Here's just some data measurements. It just shows the difference between caffeine and taurine, and then the mixture of both, and then control shows just what it would mean on a controlled amount, a reasonable amount and what you should be having per day. And you can see that in the caffeine, that pre-caffeine, it was significantly shorter than the heart rate after caffeine. Taurine stayed about the same, so that is good. And then the mixture of both, it definitely increased a good amount, but also not too much. And then controlled, it was pretty normal, pretty not that much of a heart rate increase. There are some restrictions on who can have caffeine. People with pre-existing heart conditions. I've said this a lot, but those with Arrhythmias, heart disease, or hypertension may need to limit caffeine intake or not take it at all, as it could exacerbate these conditions. Pregnant women. Excessive caffeine intake during pregnancy can increase the risk of complications, including preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy, low birth weight, and preterm birth. The last one is individual sensitive to caffeine. Some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others and may experience negative cardiovascular effects like palpitations or jitteriness, even with moderate intake. Thank you.